Welcome everyone. Today we are unpacking a really fascinating explainer on the absolute science of skin tones. We're specifically looking at why different complexions react so wildly differently to sunlight. Okay, let's dive into this explainer and unpack the biology behind pigmentation. Think about your own skin for just a second. Have you ever wondered why some people step outside and seem to burn almost instantly, while others, well, they rarely burn, but instead they struggle with these stubborn brown patches after just a little sun exposure, or maybe an acne breakout, right? Well, these aren't just random cosmetic quirks, they're actually highly predictable biological responses. So, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, what is the Fitzpatrick Scale? Second, the 6 phototypes explained. Third, melanin and pigmentation risks. Fourth, why pigmentation lasts longer. And fifth, skincare for your skin type. All right, starting off with Section 1. What is the Fitzpatrick Scale, a global classification?
So, the Fitzpatrick Scale. It's this global classification method used by dermatologists everywhere. It essentially groups skin based entirely on how it reacts to ultraviolet radiation, specifically how it burns and how it tans. And while it was originally developed to assess sun sensitivity in lighter-skinned individuals, it's really evolved. Now it's a universal tool used across all populations to understand our overall UV response.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 6 phototypes explained and how we categorize skin. Dermatologists actually divide skin into 6 distinct phototypes. We start at one extreme with type 1. This is very fair skin that always burns, literally never tans. Type 2 is fair skin that burns easily, but it might tan just a little bit. Then moving into the middle of the spectrum, we've got type 3, which is a medium tone that sometimes burns and tans gradually. Type 4 represents olive or brown tones. They rarely burn and tan quite easily. Finally, down at the deeper end, we have type 5. That's a dark brown tone that almost never burns and tans strongly. And type 6, deeply pigmented skin that never burns and just remains consistently dark. Finding exactly where you sit in this framework is absolutely the first step to predicting your skin's unique vulnerabilities. Which brings us to Section 3, melanin and pigmentation risks, and those biological responses. You see, this scale isn't just some visual color chart. It actually predicts how your skin produces melanin. Lighter tones, so types I and II, they have lower levels of a dark pigment called eumelanin, which basically acts as a natural shield. With weaker natural protection, they're highly prone to burning and UV-related redness. Conversely, medium and deeper tones, types 3 through 6, they just have more melanin. So when they're exposed to sunlight or inflammation, their defense mechanism is to produce extra melanin rather than burning. And that extra melanin is exactly what results in a tan or hyperpigmentation. And this brilliantly illustrates that exact biological difference. All skin suffers UV damage for sure, but some tones just have a stronger natural defense. According to the data, darker tones can have an intrinsic SPF value of around 13.4, whereas lighter tones, they average an intrinsic SPF of just 3.4. Because of this massive difference in natural protection, lighter tones burn as their very first visible response to UV rays, while darker tones pigment as their first response. Let's jump into Section 4. Why pigmentation lasts longer, looking at the cellular differences. The real answer here lies at the cellular level, specifically with these little structures called melanosomes. Melanosomes are just tiny, pigment-carrying structures located inside your skin cells. And how these tiny structures behave? Well, that's actually one of the biggest biological differences between the different Fitzpatrick types. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how structurally these melanosomes differ wildly depending on your skin type. In darker tones, they are larger, they're separate, and they're far more resistant to breakdown. And because they don't break down easily, that pigmentation stays longer and is much more intense. On the flip side, in lighter tones, they're smaller, clustered together, and they break down rapidly as the skin cells naturally move upward and shed. This perfectly explains why issues like post-acne marks and melasma are just so much more stubborn in medium to deep phototypes. Okay, our final section, Section 5, skincare for your skin type and making smart choices. If you fall into that type I or type 2 category, we know your intrinsic SPF is extremely low. So your daily regimen absolutely must focus entirely on burn prevention. Practically, this means prioritizing a higher daily SPF to compensate for that lack of natural eumelanin. You'll also want to incorporate antioxidant support to defend against the rapid UV-related damage and redness your skin is highly prone to. On the other hand, if you're a type 3, 4, 5, or 6, your strategy shifts entirely over to protecting against pigmentation. Because your melanosomes are larger and so resistant to breaking down, you've got to strictly avoid unprotected sun exposure, especially after any sort of skin inflammation or an acne breakout. That inflammation immediately triggers excess melanin production. And hey, when discoloration does happen, just treat it consistently, knowing that biologically it's simply going to be slower to fade. That's just how the cells work.
So, the crucial point is this. The Fitzpatrick Scale is not about beauty. It is a scientific tool that explains how melanin works, how long pigmentation lasts, and how quickly it appears. It is a strict medical framework designed to help us understand our unique biological needs, completely free from cosmetic trends.
Which leaves us with this final thought. You now know that a sunburn and a stubborn dark spot are really just two different biological reactions triggered by the exact same ultraviolet radiation. Knowing your exact phototype and how your specific melanosomes behave, how will you tailor your UV protection strategy moving forward? Take this science, apply it to your daily routine, and protect the skin you're in based on facts, not guesswork. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning out there.